All right, chapter 11, designing organizational structure. It's our last chapter for this course. All right, our learning objectives. We're going to describe 6 key elements in organizational design. We'll contrast mechanistic and organic structures, discuss the contingency factors that favor either the mechanistic model or the organic model of organizational design, describe traditional organizational design options, discuss organizing flexibility in the 21st century, and develop your skin at acquiring and using power, and know how to stay connected and in the loop when working remotely. All right, so organizational design. Organizing is the management function that involves arranging and structuring work to accomplish the organization's goals. Okay, just like a restaurant probably has tables to clean, tables to serve, tables to make drinks for. It has dishes that need to be washed. That manager is going to arrange and structure the work so that everyone knows what their job function is and what they should be doing when, so that you can meet the organizational goals of, servicing the guest and running a profitable restaurant. And that organizational structure, that's the formal arrangements of the jobs within the organization. Okay. So again, in a restaurant, that would be the bussers, the wait staff, the bartenders, the dishwashers, the cooks. Okay. However, that is structured and who's over them and who reports to who. And an organizational chart, you'll probably see this in a lot of different organizations. You'll see it maybe within your student organization if you have one, any companies that you work at. That's the visual representation of an organization's structure. Okay. It typically looks like a flow chart, and it shows who reports to who. And then organizational design, that's the creating or changing of an organization's structure. Okay, so as a organization, we'll talk about this later on, as it changes size, or maybe it changes its geographic location, or just things within the organization change, that design does tend to have to change along with it. All right, so the purpose of organizing divides the work to be done into specific jobs and departments, assign tasks and responsibilities associated with individual jobs. Okay, so if your job is to clean a table, it's going to outline how you would do that, the tools that you need. Do you need a sanitizer? Do you need towels? What When you clean the table, do you also need to restock the condiments? Okay, so it's not just cleaning the tables, right? You're also maybe sweeping underneath it. You are wiping down the chairs. You're making sure that it's not broken. If it is, you'll tag it for repair. You'll make sure there's no cuts on the tablecloth, or just things like that. So those different responsibilities with an individual job. They also coordinate diverse and organizational tasks. They cluster jobs into units, establish relationships among individuals, groups, and departments. Okay, so not just managing the individual person, but managing that team and developing a culture, and developing camaraderie within that group. This establishes formal lines of authority and allocates and deploys organizational resources. All right, work specialization. That's dividing work activities into separate jobs and tasks. Okay. And then departmentalization is the basis by which jobs are grouped together. All right. So when we specialize the job tasks, when we specialize our jobs, that really makes efficient use of the diversity of the workers' skills. So if you find, maybe you're in charge of like a marketing team or something, and you find someone who is excellent at graphic design, maybe you put them in charge of graphic design for the entire team. Just because they're more efficient at that and they're much more skilled at that, and you assign other tasks to other members of the group. All right, so this is an illustration here of sometimes how our specialization it can be a good thing. It can be very efficient, but it also gets to the point where Okay, so let's say that you're working on an assembly line and your job is to, you work for Ford or something like that. Your job is to put mufflers on cars every single day. And you're really good at it and you're very fast at it. So every single day you put mufflers on car time after time after time after time. Um, so there comes a certain point where for most people you get fast at it, you get very, very efficient, but you reach a point where you're no longer where you get kind of bored and it's just not as exciting anymore. Um, and you kind of want to do something different. There's this drop off. Okay, so if you find that an employee is doing the same task over and over and over again, it's very monotonous. Maybe they're calling in sick to work. Maybe they're just kind of slacking in their productivity. That might be an opportunity for you to change up what they're doing because they've gotten to the point where um, they're no longer efficient in that job, not because they stopped getting good at it, but just because it's no longer something that they're not increasingly getting better at it, so they're no longer motivated at completing those tasks. There's 5 common forms of departmentalization. Okay, and again, this is how we group jobs according to function. So in our first example here, we have a plant manager who has divided its organization into engineering, accounting, manufacturing, human resources, and purchasing. This is a very common form of departmentalization. And as we can see here, it's got a lot of positive qualities to it, but some things that can be negative or just areas of opportunity for this organization. There's poor communication across the functional areas. So, engineering and accounting probably don't talk very much. And then there's a limited view of organizational goals. So, if you're in manufacturing, you don't really see what happens in human resources or in purchasing. So, it's hard for you to kind of fathom what those organizational goals are. Then we look at geographical departmentalization, and this is where we group jobs according to geographic regions. So you've got in this example, a sales director for the Western region, Southern, Midwestern, and Eastern regions. And this is important because these different areas probably have, different demographics, different laws, different time zones, just different things that make their different departments. They're going to operate a little bit differently. And one negative part to this might just be that you feel very disconnected from another organizational area. So if I'm in the Eastern region, I don't feel very connected to the Western region. Next, in this example, our product departmentalization, we've grouped jobs by product line. So we can see this company probably sells some sort of vehicles. It looks like trains or something. So um, there's a mass transit sector. So, like, think of like subways, elevated trains, things like that. Then you have recreational and utility vehicles. And then you also have rail products sectors. So, in this division of the different departments, you can really become an expert in that particular area that you're managing. But again, all these different departments really aren't going to see what's going on in other departments, and they have a very limited view on those organizational goals. You also have where the mass transit division will probably have an HR director or something like that. The rail and diesel products division will also have an HR director. So you have this crossover. You have multiple people doing the exact same job, which might lead to some inefficiencies just depending on what their span of command is. In process departmentalization, we group jobs based on basis of product or customer flow. Okay, so in this particular example, we've got a sawing department manager, a plant and milling departments manager, assembling department manager, lacquering and sanding department manager, finishing department manager. So They're all very specialized in the different products that they're in charge of. So chances are, whoever's in charge of the sewing department is going to have no idea what's going on in the lacquering department, or have any idea of what their job functions is. So there's a little bit of this type of departmentalization would require a very heavy specialization on each job group. And then you have customer departmentalization, and that's where we group jobs on basis of specific and unique customers who have common needs. Okay, so you see this a lot in vehicles. So you're going to have people that sell to the regular retail department. So if you come in, you say you need to buy a car. Those people know about financing for the regular consumer. They know about the vehicles for the regular consumer. Then you're going to have the people that are in charge of fleet vehicles, and these are going to be more of they're going to sell a couple at a time. You might need a couple trucks for your organization, or several vans for, let's say, your delivery service or something like that. So you're buying like 10 or 20 at a time. So you're going to have different knowledge of different pay plans and different financing options. And then you would have someone who sells like to the government. So maybe it's like to police departments, or schools, or things like that. And so they're going to have different knowledge. Okay. So again, duplication of other functions, but it does require a lot more specialization. All right, so cross-functional teams. Cross-functional teams that's a work team composed of individuals from various functional specialties. Okay, so when we make these teams, these tasks, we typically make them when the tasks become more complex and diverse, so that we can really specialize on getting these tasks done. So this group of people is really focused on maybe one particular goal, one specialty. Example might be where they're joined together to solve a problem or develop like a new product. So you might put someone from R&D together with marketing, with sales. That would be an example. All right, so chain of command. All right, this is the line of authority extending from upper organizational levels to lower levels, which clarifies who reports to whom. Okay, so much like it just basically says who do you report to? Okay, who is your direct supervisor? Who is the one who is in charge? Who is responsible for giving you tasks, for giving you feedback, for the hiring and firing of you, giving you raises, things like that. When nobody wants to have several different bosses. Okay, if you think about like your parents, your mom tells you to unload the dishwasher, your dad tells you to clean your room. You can only get one done. You're going to disappoint one of them. Who are you supposed to listen to? Okay, so this chain of command states that really you should only have one boss and one person who gives you that direction. Now, that doesn't mean that there's not someone over them, but chances are they're going to manage you through your direct supervisor. So like in a restaurant, maybe there's a general manager, and maybe you're part of the wait staff, and you probably have a wait staff manager who does your schedule, and things like that. Your general manager, might ask you to work on Thursday, but they're going to go through your scheduling manager to make sure that happens. All right, so authority. Authority is the line extending from upper organizational levels to the lowest level. Again, it clarifies who reports to whom. Staff authority. This is like your shift leader, your head weights, things like that. People who have been given just a little bit more responsibility. This is a great tool to use if you have someone that you're not quite sure how they're going to do in a leadership position. Start giving them little tasks and little things that they can take ownership of or be in charge of. And this will really give you a good idea as to whether or not this is a good candidate for you. This tool can also be used for maybe your staffing levels are a little bit low as far as like in your management sector, or if you have someone who, again, if we go back to the economies and the diseconomies of labor, if they have become bored or need just a little bit more with their job, giving them that staff authority helps to kind of reinvigorate them, and helps them to manage maybe the department that they work in. All right, responsibility. That's the obligation or expectations to perform any assigned duties. Okay. So a busser is responsible for cleaning the tables. A busser is responsible for maybe the cleanliness of the bathrooms or sweeping the floor or just whatever responsibilities that they have. That unity of command, that's the management principle again, that each person should report to only one manager. And span of control is the number of employees a manager can effectively and efficiently manage. So we see here, typically, we kind of start to, your span of control is going to be different depending on what you manage and how comfortable you are with managing. So a brand new manager is going to have, is going to be challenged probably managing more than 4 to 5 people at a time. Okay. But a more experienced manager, they might be able to handle 8, 9, or 10. Okay. But we're also talking about, there's one thing to manage them, but then effectively manage them. So we have to think about how we get our regular day-to-day work done as well as effectively manage those people. So depending on what your responsibilities are, maybe you have to meet with them once a week. Maybe that's part of your responsibilities to meet with your team. If you have 8 to 12 people, you might be able to meet with them, but maybe you're not effectively meeting with them. Maybe you're quickly seeing them at the coffee maker and talking to them, and you're counting that as a meeting, and maybe it's not as impactful as it should be. Okay. So we think that our ideal number is probably between about 4 to 8 people, but it also kind of affects the how you structure the organization. So if you see in this image here, we have let's say our span of control, we're gonna say no one can manage more than 4 people. Okay, well, you've got your CEO up top, then you probably have like 4 vice presidents. You've got 16 presidents underneath them, each of them managing 4 people. Then you go to 64, 256. So all the way down here, level 7, we got 4,096 employees. Okay. But if we go with a span of 8, we've got our CEO, we have our VP. You probably have directors here, maybe some frontline managers, and then frontline employees. Okay, and that's only 5 levels. Here you've got an extra 2 levels. So it really kind of seems like here, when you assume that span of 4, that there's just probably people in management positions that should be frontline workers. Okay, that might not have the responsibility that depending on the organization, they might not have the responsibility to hold that job title, right? And they're not doing the work that would be required of a manager because there's so many different people. And then you also look at, I mean, if our frontline workers, that 4,096, let's say they're all hourly employees, and everything after that, you're looking at salaried workers, which have benefits, and they have insurance, and they have vacation time, and different perks to the job, or different there's a lot of cost associated there. So in our organizational level that has 7 levels, you also have a lot more employees. So again, depending on what your organization needs, you might look at controlling that span of, is 8 too many? Maybe we need to look at 7. Maybe we need to look at 6, just because that's a lot of employees to have and have on your payroll. Now, centralization and decentralization. Centralization is the degree to which decision making is concentrating at upper levels of the organization. Okay, so as a frontline worker, if I'm in a centralized, or there's heavy centralization in my organization, chances of me contributing to any sort of decision are very, very slim. Okay, everything comes down from the top. But in a decentralized organization, our lower level employees have the opportunity to provide input and actually make decisions. Okay, so you're going to see that more. Like last chapter, we talked about entrepreneurs and their innovation. More of those entrepreneurial ventures are more decentralized because you have those frontline workers that are contributing to the innovation of the company. So we see kind of the difference here. Most of the time, in a more centralized environment, it's typically in a larger company because they don't have the leeway to have so many different frontline workers making different decisions. Okay, and when you think about very large organization, let's say you have, let's say you're a restaurant company like a, I don't know, like a Wendy's or something like that. If you have 5 restaurants and you have um let's say you put 2 ounces of lettuce on each burger, right? But it's really supposed to be an ounce and a half, and you've got employees that kind of change up their mind on I think our guests like it more with a little more lettuce. But if you have like 300 restaurants and they're all kind of making different decisions on how much lettuce they put on a burger, which doesn't really seem like it's a big deal, that has huge implications for how much lettuce they're buying, what their contract is. Like at the procurement level, as far as like, are we going through, pallets of lettuce, or are we going through cases of lettuce? Like, that would really affect it like from a financial level. And so you think about like a decision that's as small as lettuce, you want a larger organizations needs things to be more controlled. So again, it comes from the top. A decentralized organization is typically a little bit smaller, or maybe it's more spread out. Maybe there's different divisions that are in different geographic areas, so where people have to make different decisions for what's right for their demographic. When we look at employee empowerment and formalization, so a decentralized organization does allow for your employee to feel more empowered because they have the opportunity to make decisions at their level. And a formalization is how standardized an organization's jobs are and the extent to which employee behavior is guided by rules and procedures. Okay. So in a more centralized organization, there's probably more formalization. If everything's coming from the top, it's more streamlined. It's directed to the individual units in a very controlled, procedural way. You think of rules and procedures, and standard operating procedures, how those are rolled out. In a less formalized organization, again, you're more empowered to make some of those decisions. Maybe there aren't rules out how to handle certain situations. You just have to figure out how to do it on your own, but you do have the power to do so. So a mechanistic organization, that's one that's designed is very rigid and tightly controlled, again, more centralized. An organic organization is something that's highly adaptive and flexible. Okay, it has the opportunity to change with its environment, has the opportunity to change with different geographic areas, as well as different changes in the economy. You think of it as more alive and kind of moving and always growing, where a mechanistic organization, they do things the same way all the time, and there's little to no change there. So here's the mechanistic versus organic organizations. And if you ask me which one should you work for, you have to think of how you find where you work best. Okay, if you want to do something where you have lots of different like you do a lot of different things for your job, if you want to have more freedom, but freedom also comes with more responsibilities for the decisions that you make, then you would go with an organic organization. But if you're looking for a lot of structure, a lot of people thrive in structure. If you're looking for less responsibility because you don't have as many decisions to make, then maybe you'll work for like a more mechanistic organization. All right, so a couple things do determine our structure. The strategy, an organization structure should facilitate goal achievement. Okay, so whatever their structure is, that should move them towards what their goals are. So if their goal is expanding to, like, let's say maybe a new geographic region, maybe um, they're focused more on training. Okay, so their structure maybe either places trainers in different departments, or maybe they've just focused on growing that department. The size of the organization really does affect the structure, especially when you think about span of control, and if we're expanding to different areas, how those need to be divided and managed. And then whatever the technology is, and then the environmental uncertainty. Okay, in an unstable and simple environments, a mechanistic design can be more effective. Okay, but if it's a very uncertain time, you've got to have a more organic organization where people can pivot and move, and handle a lot of different change. All right, so traditional organization design options. Okay, your simple structure. This is for your smaller organizations. They have little departmentalization, wide spans of control, and centralized authority, and little formalization. A functional structure, that's an organizational design that groups together similar or related occupational specialties. And then a divisional structure is an organizational structure that's made up of separate semi-autonomous units and divisions. And in this graphic here, we kind of see the strengths and weaknesses of the traditional versus the simple, the functional, and the divisional structures. And there's a couple other popular structure designs: team structure, matrix, and project structures. And project structures. Projects would be, if you have, right now we have the new hotel. They are building the new tower. So there's probably a project that involves that, however, well, they're going to have a grand opening for that wing. Okay, so there's a team together that's working on that project. Okay, once that project is over, they'll move on to something else, and there might be another project there. A matrix product structure. There's a graphic here. So we see here. Let's compare this to like a Procter and Gamble or something like that. So maybe your product's toothpaste. You're going to have a member from your team, who's in the marketing group, who's in customer service, who's in research development. Maybe your other product is deodorant. Okay, you're going to market it a little bit different than you are toothpaste. Okay, there's different chemicals that go into it. So you're going to have a different member of research and development. And as far as customer service, there's probably different problems or different ways to handle toothpaste versus deodorant. And then maybe your third product is shampoo. So again, there's different needs for those products. So we have different members that make up that matrix of those groups. All right, a boundaryless organization. That's an organization whose design is not defined to or limited to the horizontal, vertical, and external boundaries imposed by predefined structure. And then a virtual organization. This is an organization that consists of a small core of full-time employees and outside specialists temporarily hired as needed to work on projects. So if you listened to the chapter 10 video, I said, a venture that we could try out is, let's say I had a company where I offered online virtual tutoring. in that type of organization, it's probably going to be a couple people that work in an office, but then I'm probably going to hire outside, let's say teachers or whatnot, for shorter contracts because chances of them needing to tutor during the summer are probably not very big. They're probably going to be, I'm probably going to need more tutors during like December and May when finals are around or during midterms or things like that. So I'm typically like, I'm probably not going to have as many full-time employees, but I will have a lot of part-time support staff. So that would be an example of a virtual organization. Then you have task forces and telecommuting. Okay. And one of the biggest things I want you to think about with telecommuting. Okay. Before COVID, this was kind of like if you got to telecommute, that was kind of a big deal. But since COVID, we've kind of realized that we can be more flexible with jobs and whatnot. But think about how you would manage different employees. Okay. Um, I know a lot of us want to work in a job that allows us to telecommute or allows us to work from home. But as a manager, it's hard to relay information to a team that isn't all in the same place. It's hard to build company culture without like serious effort. Um, Also, when you think about like efficiency levels, making sure that your employees are on task is a challenge. And so those are things that we need to think about before we just decide to allow people to telecommute. How are we going to hold them accountable? What are the rules with telecommuting as far as when do they need to be online? When are they allowed to step away? How does that work? Um, I know that I did a part-time job during the pandemic, and one tool that they used is that whenever I was clocked in, they utilized a software that would screenshot whatever I was working on. So it was something that kept me on task. It also allowed them to make sure they weren't paying for someone who was just kind of like online shopping or wasn't as productive as they said they were being. Then lastly, we have compressed work weeks, flex time, and job sharing. Okay, so compressed work week is a work week where employees work longer hours per day but fewer days per week. Okay, this is very popular in oil and gas. A lot of those employees will have every other Friday off, so they'll work 10-hour days, which when you think about it, isn't much. A 10-hour day isn't much longer than an 8-hour day when you're in the office. If you got every other Friday off, there's definitely a benefit to that. It allows for longer weekends. Your employees don't tend to take as much vacation. They don't need to take as much vacation time off because they can have those longer weekends. So you typically are going to get a more productive and a happier employee if that is a job that you can implement, if that's a structure you can implement. You have flex time, and that's a scheduling system in which employees are required to work a specific number of hours in a week, but are free to vary those hours within certain limits. Okay, so I think of that kind of like this class online teaching. Okay, I might not necessarily work 8 to 5, but I do check my email. I do some grading at nighttime because it allows me to take care of other things, pick up my kids from school, take them to their different activities, as long as I'm still putting in the work and grading assignments and whatnot. And then job sharing, that's the practice of having two or more people split up a full-time job. Lots of times there's jobs that need to be covered at all times. You think of like, servers in a restaurant, the tables most likely always need to be covered. Okay, so you're going to have different people working different shifts. Same thing with like doctors and nurses. Like in a hospital setting, that's a round the clock kind of position that always needs to be covered. So you have different people sharing that job. All right, and that concludes all of our chapters for management principles. Go ahead. There should be one more video for you to watch, maybe a TED Talk or whatnot on Blackboard. And we will see you later.